guys so much. Yes, Luke? Okay, great. We're streaming. Guys, welcome to the Walkaway Thought Revolution College Campus Tour, UC Berkeley. Again, I want to just take a minute to say thank you so much to those of you who showed up tonight, who participated in the conversation when we were tabling today. We were standing outside. We had some signs talking about various cultural issues from the transgender LGBT community to what race issues to economic policy, Trump, et cetera. And we're going to kind of get into all of it tonight. I do want to say what kind of makes Walkaway, I think, different and unique and special is that we're actually, despite a lot of misreporting about us, we're not a Republican organization. We're not even necessarily really a conservative organization, and we're not a pro-Trump organization. Although all of us that you'll be talking to tonight, it is a movement of former liberals walking away from the political left, walking away from the Democratic Party. But we've always said with Walkaway since day one, Walkaway is a journey, not a destination. What we mean by that is that we encourage people to engage in their own path of free thinking, of doing their own homework, doing their own research, taking a journey away from the manipulation and exploitation of the left-wing media, of the false narratives, I think, of the Democrats, and honestly, the erroneous and false belief system of liberalism, I think that so many of us bought into. Everyone on the panel tonight has had an awakening of some sort that led them to walk away from the Democratic Party. We'll get into that, and we'll get into issues that are affecting us right now today, going into what's happening in the next couple of weeks. So with that, I'd love to introduce the panel that we have with us tonight. Who's going to sit over here? Does it matter? Oh, GOTHIX. Ladies and gentlemen, YouTuber GOTHIX.
Is that mine?
This is yours.
Oh, okay, whatever.
Have a seat.
All right, cool.
And then we'll bring up what next? Mikey Harlow? Yeah, why not? Mike Harlow. And please welcome Natalie Beisner, who is also a new employee to the Walkaway campaign. And yeah, so with that, we'll kind of just, I think, go this direction and kind of talk about our experiences leaving the left. And oh, there's a Q&A at the end as well. So please, we'd love to hear from you guys if you have questions, comments, if you want to argue with anything that you heard.
Okay.
Fair game.
Cool. Well, thank you guys so much for coming here. And if you were here earlier, we really appreciate you guys coming out, even if you disagree with us. My name is Vanessa, but most people know me online as GOTHIX. I am a content creator. I got my start being a Twitch streamer, just playing video games, and that's literally all I did, 9 to 5, until I had an opinion online that rubbed people the wrong way. And the opinion was me questioning why everyone was calling people racist for disagreeing with Disney casting The Little Mermaid as a black actress. So if you had any reservations or questions about that, you were automatically racist. And I thought that was a little bit odd. You know, I think there's some nuance to the conversation to be had, and people didn't want to hear it. And then fast forward to 2020, where we have COVID and Black Lives Matter happening. I'm wondering, why is the news telling us we have to stay home and flatten the curve, but you can go out and protest and booty shake for George Floyd, and that's totally fine. It didn't make any sense to me. And again, I'm just questioning, like, what's going on with this? It's not making any sense. And then I started going down a rabbit hole. I discovered people like Thomas Sowell, Booker T. Washington, and I realized that the political left for generations has been curating this certain identity politics ideology to captivate the minds of black Americans, so then Democrats can wave a little carrot over their head every year and expect them to vote. And I'm just not okay with that. And so, yeah, I walked away from the left. I am politically homeless. I don't identify with any political party. I just go where the truth is. And now I'm really loud on the mic. And that is pretty much it, okay? I gave you a really fast version.
Sure. My story really began kind of, and people have heard this like 1,000 times, so I'll actually make mine pretty quick. But my story began really after the 2016 election, because I was a two-time Barack Obama voter, voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016, and like many, many people, when Donald Trump got elected, I thought the sky was falling. I thought America was doomed. Okay, we'll take questions at the end, but yeah, what? Go ahead.
Why Hillary 2016?
Okay, yeah. Save questions for the end, though. Yeah. I voted for Hillary in 2016 because it never dawned on me to vote for anybody except for a Democrat. I didn't even think that a Republican was an option to me. I'm a gay man. I grew up in a small town in Nebraska. And when I was growing up, the messages that I received early on were that the Democrats are the party of that cares about marginalized minorities, that care. That's okay. That care about the working class, that care about downtrodden people, and care about equity and things like that. The Republicans are the party of greedy, self-interested, straight white people who only care about other greedy, self-interested, straight white people. And so I fell for the marketing of the Democrat Party, which was the entertainment industry, the news media, the music industry, everything that said, if you are a black person, a brown person, an LGBT person, the only option that you have is to vote Democrat because the Republicans hate you. And so it really didn't dawn on me to make any other choice. Except I knew I was going to vote for Barack Obama because he was a black man and it was time for America to have a black president. I didn't really care about his qualifications or what he stood for or what his values were. I just cared that he was black and that the Hollywood celebrities were saying you got to vote for this black person, and so was the most of the mainstream media. And when Hillary announced that she was running, I was then very excited to have our first woman president, so I voted for her. And I believed the media that had told me that Donald Trump had like a 3% chance of winning. She was going to win in a landslide, which was really good news because that same media also kept saying that he was a racist, a bigot, a homophobe, the second coming of Hitler, that he was pretty much the same stuff they're saying today, right? So when he got elected, I was really shocked and horrified, and two things were going on at the same time. One, I was a mess because Donald Trump had become the president, but two, I didn't understand how the media that I trusted could get it so wrong. And so my journey to understanding was never a journey to try to be okay with Trump or the Republican Party. I just knew that I was really miserable when Donald Trump got elected. I mean, like literally like crying on Facebook Live videos. And so I went on this journey to try to understand how the media got it so wrong. And when I started to fall down rabbit hole after rabbit hole for months, what I ultimately discovered was that pretty much everything that I believed that the media had been telling me was a lie. It was a manipulation to try to control the way that I think, so they could control the way that I feel, so that they could control the way that I vote. And Donald Trump is not a racist. He's not a bigot. He's not out to destroy America. He's not a dictator or a tyrant or the second incarnation of Adolf Hitler. He's actually, I think, and again, this is not about supporting Trump, but that's where my journey led me. As I said before, it's a journey, not a destination. My journey led me to supporting Donald Trump because I came to realize that as a gay man, not to mention just as an American in general, but if you are black or brown or LGBT or an immigrant or a woman, the Democrats and the media are lying to us, they're using us, they're exploiting us and manipulating us so that they can get our vote. And that's all they care about. And but Donald Trump actually, he didn't need to do this. It started to kind of come clear to me. He's a very wealthy man with a beautiful wife who could have had an amazing life and just played golf and enjoyed his grandchildren and being with his incredibly hot wife for his remaining years. And instead he put himself in a position where he's getting shot in the head and criminally indicted 900 times and threatened with imprisonment, and they're trying to bankrupt him and destroy his life in every possible way. And he's still doing this because he sees what's at stake. And he knows what we're up against, and that if we have 4 more years of the Democratic Party, I don't think America can survive it. So ultimately, it was the realization that the media that I had been believing my entire life was duplicitous and lying to me. And so I walked away from the Democratic Party. And when I did, I lost about 90% of my friends because I started speaking out about what I was learning and challenging the things that I believed and that my friends, fellow liberals believed. And what I first noticed was that I was being met with this wall of hostility and contempt just for changing my mind. Just for asking questions or just saying, and it began with just things like, did he really call all Mexicans rapists? No. Is the Muslim ban really a ban? No. Is the border wall racist? No. But just by asking these questions, people began to turn on me. And I guess the rebellious nature inside of me just said, to hell with this. I'm a gay man. I've already lived in the closet. I'm not going to live in the closet twice. There's nothing wrong with what I believe or what I think. I'm changing my mind, which is my prerogative. And if I can't be allowed to do that, then I need to walk away. And so I did. And then I started the Walkaway campaign. And other people have walked away too.
And it's been nothing but trouble ever since.
Yeah. And it's been nothing but hell ever since. Yeah.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I'm only here for the free pizza, but I guess
Right.
I'll chime in or something.
Absolutely.
My name's Mike. I come from New York City, born and raised my entire life. I guess my walkaway kind of started around the primary of the 2016 election. I'd always cared about politics and wanted to educate myself, and it was really in that primary trying to decide between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton, because especially if you're from Blue City, Republican is not even a consideration to you. Democrat is just the default. So of course those were my only two choices. And I was very undecided and wanted to educate myself on the two candidates, their history, their records, what they would do. And I found that no matter which of them I dug into, I wasn't allowed to. So you find something about Bernie Sanders you don't love. That's racist. You better not say that. Something about Hillary Clinton you don't love. That's sexist. And I've just always been the type of person that you tell me not to do something, I'm going to do it. You tell me not to say something, I'm going to say it louder. And so I just kept researching and researching. And then I didn't vote for Trump in 2016. I just kind of threw my vote away third party because I was like, I can't stand all these people. I had a lot of doubts about Trump because I watched every season of Celebrity Apprentice and I was not happy with his choices. So I didn't think he would be a great president, but he outdid my expectations. And then once he was, we'll have questions after, Mr. Pope.
Yeah. What's that?
Oh.
Okay.
I just checked on YouTube.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Just continue on. Sorry.
What was I saying?
Yeah. Celebrity
Oh, yeah.
Apprentice.
Like celebrity.
Aubrey O'Day should have won. Anyway, so I didn't vote for him, but then once he became president, the things that you would hear about him doing versus what he was actually doing and trying to find the raw data and the raw footage and the raw facts were completely night and day. And so I just kept researching more. What do you mean there is no Muslim ban? This was an Obama-era policy. And I very quickly learned that they really only have one tactic, which is emotional manipulation. So overnight, I became a racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic Nazi. I always tell them only homophobic is true. But yeah, it became very clear to me how they pit minority groups against each other. Minorities are their human shields. It is how they effectively manipulate people. And it's only so effective because we're not a racist country. We're not a homophobic country. We're not any of these things, that those words have so much sway over people. And so I really learned the destructive impact of both their policies and their messaging, pitting every group against every group. And I would say, look at the results of it. You have every group fighting with each other. We can no longer agree on basic facts. We can no longer agree what a man or a woman is. And they just pander to every group. By running Kamala Harris, they're pandering very hard for the gay vote by nominating a whore.
Wow.
So, anyway, that's basically my story.
Wow.
Hi, I'm Natalie. Thank you guys all for being here. I come from Southern California. I've been there my whole life, and I was an actress for a while. And I'm also a millennial, and I feel like everyone in Southern California who's a millennial and then also is involved in acting at all, you know, you kind of just are reflexively Democrat, you're reflexively liberal. And I kind of just took it as gospel truth that if you're a compassionate person, you vote Democrat. And I didn't really think about it. Every 4 years, I would go vote for the Democrat candidate for president and then not even know anything else on the ballot at all or care. I voted for Obama. I voted for Hillary Clinton. And then 2020 happened, and in March 2020, I lost both of my jobs overnight, and I never saw those jobs again, although I didn't necessarily know that that was going to be the case at the time. And I complied with everything that was asked of me. I did everything to a T. I didn't visit my family. I had a grandmother dying alone, not from COVID, just dying alone unnecessarily. But I followed all the rules. And then summer 2020 came around, and I was told, we were all actually told that we could go out and protest or riot, especially in Los Angeles, but we still couldn't go to work. And I thought that was crazy because I need to go to work. And I'm actually someone who needs a paycheck and can't just survive on what the government gives me. Need family, maybe need to not have my grandmother die alone, which she ended up doing. And, you know, I watched as the Democrats in my city, I mean, certainly it was Republicans too at the time. I'm not excusing that at all, but I watched as the politicians in my city and all the talking heads and even some of the medical professionals, as they said, do not shut down these protests, which I actually agree with. I think that you should have your peaceful protests, and BLM would have been an organization that, as a liberal, as a lifelong Democrat, I would have supported. But every time that I just asked the question about why can't I go to work? Is this really as deadly as they say? I was called racist and selfish by all the people who knew me and loved me and had done theater with me and knew the kind of woman that I was. And it blew my mind. I was told to read How to Be an Anti-Racist and White Privilege, which in fact I did, and they're trash, they're garbage. You know, because and that was one of the reasons I had left acting years earlier, is that I had seen this push for racial diversity above everything else, and this push to only tell a certain kind of story. And I don't mind racial diversity at all, but I don't think it should be your top goal. And I do not, the first time I heard white privilege was when I was a Democrat, and I had drank all the Kool-Aid, but I don't identify with white privilege. You know, I'm blessed in a lot of ways, in the same way we all are, to be able-bodied. I have a family who loves me. I'm an American. But none of that has to do with the color of my skin. And my family has struggled immensely. My parents have struggled immensely. I have struggled immensely. I'm sure everyone in this room has. And so that was kind of the start of it. And then when it came to 2020, and it was like my experience didn't matter, and I was one of millions of Americans of every color who we knew relatively early on we were going to be okay. And I'm sorry for the people who weren't okay with COVID, but it affected a very specific part of the population, and to tell me that I couldn't go to work. And in Los Angeles, it didn't end. You know, if this had been a blip on the radar, maybe I would have stayed a Democrat and just forgiven it. But Los Angeles was in a mask mandate for 2 straight years. I tried to go back to work early. I got off unemployment when I could have stayed on, and I ended up getting fired because I didn't want to take the shot. And I had tried to go back to work early to another job. We had vaccine passports for a period of about 6 months. I could not go into a bar or restaurant and be served indoors. I had to sit outdoors if there was room, no matter what the weather was, or I could take it to go. And obviously that's not the end of the world, but it's also not American. And there were many jobs that I couldn't work. I couldn't go to events. And I have lived in LA for 10 years, and I've lived in California my entire life and paid taxes there and been a law-abiding citizen. And that is egregious. So I walked away from the Democrat Party because they never said sorry. They've never apologized. They've never reckoned with that. And certainly, as I said, we all did bad in the first 2 weeks, but the Democrats milked it for every dang drop that it was worth, and then some. It was horrible living in LA. It was horrible. And the fact that that happened, I still can't believe it. I'll never, ever forget it at all. And then you start, at the time, I hated Donald Trump, but you start researching, because to me, as someone who didn't know anything about politics, just wanted to go back to work, it seemed at the time like he was the only guy talking about opening up the country again. And I know now that he wasn't, but it just seemed like he was. And I hated him so much, but I was so desperate to get back to work. And looking around me, everything was so insane that I started looking into him. And I was floored to realize how much I had been lied to. I mean, 2020 was the first time I realized that he did not say very fine people on both sides, including the neo-Nazis, where he literally says, but not the white supremacists, because they should be condemned totally. I didn't know that for 3 years. And I'm a smart woman. But that's the level of lies and manipulation that the Democrat Party and the legacy media puts on all of us. And so then I started looking into it and realizing I'd been lied to a heck of a lot. And I proudly voted for him in 2020, which is something I never thought would have happened. And again, we're not a Trump organization, but that's where some of this research leads you to, because you do realize that there are a lot of lies. And I don't mind you not liking Donald Trump, but I wish that more Americans understood the actual truth, actual reality, as opposed to the lies and the manipulation. Because it's like, if he's really as bad as you tell me that he is, why are you lying about him? Why don't you say what he actually said? Yeah. And then I'll see for myself how awful he is. But it's kind of like the enemy of my enemy is my friend, you know? So that's why I walked away from the Democrat Party, and I've never, ever looked back, because every day since it's just gotten more and more crazy, especially in LA. But I really admire you all for being here, whether you agree or disagree, because when I was a liberal, I don't think I would have sat through something like this. I wouldn't have had the wherewithal, so I think it's admirable. And one of my biggest regrets in life is not waking up sooner. So if you're someone who's like-minded and you're on the right track this young, I think that's also very laudable. So I applaud everyone in this room, really. Thank you.
So we were out tabling today, and we had different signs, kind of like talking about different issues. And at some point or another, we all like had crowds around us, like asking questions or debating or making comments about what we were saying. GOTHIX here had all the black girls around her. And I'm just curious, like, what were the conversations that were taking place? Like, what were you hearing?
I think most of the conversations were they just could not understand why I'm trying to say that everyone is a human. So the question was, do all black lives matter? Or no, what was it?
Do black lives really matter?
Do black lives really matter? And that's sort of, you can take it in two ways. The first is, okay, is a black human being a different, separate category? Meaning that if I have this skin color, am I supposed to have a certain type of worldview? Which, by the way, when I was holding up that sign, I had a few people go up to me and say, aren't you black? And that just implies that I'm supposed to think in this particular way. And so I would ask them, how am I supposed to think? And regardless of what comes out of your mouth, it's going to sound racist. So it's sort of a trick question. But then the other side of it is well, if you're saying that Black Lives Matter, and I'm assuming a lot of these people who I was talking to supported the Black Lives Matter movement, what is your stance on abortion? And that's when you can see the intellectual inconsistency. And then from that conversation, it's sort of, we ran into this circular arguments of like, okay, where is your justification for saying that abortion is morally good versus morally bad? You have to have a standard, right? And so what is that standard? And the answers that I got was social consensus, the time of this generation, which basically just means that morality is always a moving target and it can always shift. And so we're back at square one. If morality is subjective, then why are you over here complaining that I'm holding a sign? Like, I just, it didn't make any sense to me. And that shows me the level of indoctrination that I see in these girls. And the thing is I used to think that way. I know I didn't mention it when I was doing my introduction, but I used to have severe Trump derangement syndrome. And like, I identified as a liberal, but I wouldn't say I was like one of those very militant black leftists, but I definitely thought that, Trump was against my people and my people would be enslaved, and I stopped speaking to my then Republican friend. And so, yeah, it was mostly just, circular arguments regarding the inconsistencies, but yeah, it was fun.
Well, when we created that sign, I mean, the reason why we made it is because we were like, okay, for so many years, we heard the left say, Black Lives Matter has kind of become this like religion and a mantra from the political left. But at the same time, it's like, okay, well, the expectation is that if you are black, you're supposed to vote Democrat or you're supposed to be on the left. Okay, well, black people have been voting Democrat for generations. And I mean, literally generationally. So if you guys are not that familiar with Walkaway, we've been around for 6.5 years, and kind of at the heart and soul of what we do, we're a testimonial campaign. So we encourage people to make videos or written testimonials and join our groups and share their stories. And I mean, we've gotten literally hundreds of, maybe thousands of videos from black Americans walking away over the last 6.5 years. And the thing that we hear again and again and again is that it's this generational decision. My parents voted Democrat, my mom voted Democrat, my grandmother voted Democrat. Like, I was always told that I should vote Democrat. Okay, great. So black people have been voting Democrat for generations, and yet we have mass incarceration of black men. And Kamala Harris, I think, probably Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, more than any two politicians in American history, have become synonymous with mass incarceration of black men and destroying the black family. Not to mention the fact that the Democrats' economic policies have kept many black communities in poverty. If you look at Chicago or Detroit or neighborhoods all across the country. So it just seems disingenuous to me that this side of the political aisle that seems to take ownership of what it means for a black life to matter probably has done more to harm black people than anybody else in the country. That's my opinion.
I think that's true of a lot of things, though. I think it's true for their policies for women, for their policies at the border. I mean, a closed border, a secure border is a humane, compassionate border. If people end up being harmed, I think minorities end up being harmed. It's very interesting. What I found is that everyone they claim to be for, they end up harming via their policies,
Right.
and they end up manipulating, and they're not actually for women, and they're not actually helping women, and it just goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
It's amazing, though, the level of compliance. These people, their words mean nothing. That they spent a year saying Black Lives Matter and telling us that any policy that disproportionately affects people of color is systemic racism. And then not a few months later, they segregate people who will not inject themselves with experimental drugs, which at the time in New York, it was 75% of African Americans were unvaccinated. They segregated black people after saying Black Lives Matter. Couldn't go to a lunch counter, couldn't work your job, couldn't go anywhere in public. So if there's systemic racism, they're holding the banner of it.
Well, and it's also, I mean, if you look across the board at the minority communities, which I think the Democrats really feel like they have ownership of just about every minority community in this country, although I think they're quickly losing it, which is why they can't make the border open enough. You know, they're trying to, I think, flood as many people into our country illegally as they can because they're losing control of the people in this country that they feel they have ownership over, which is minorities. But what's, to me, I think, really revelatory and ironic, as well as being tragic and horrible, is that they claim to be the party that wants to bring like more equity, more freedom, more opportunity to minority communities that, according to them, are victimized and oppressed and downtrodden. However, if you happen to be a member of a minority community and you make the decision of your own free will to leave them, that is the time when they will actually actively go out of their way to try to destroy you and to try to ruin your life. And I think, I mean, well, you're a woman, but
I
I
have
was gonna say,
internalized misogyny,
Yeah.
internalized homophobia,
Right.
I have
internalized
externalized
racism.
homophobia.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
So here at Berkeley, I've heard some really crazy things from my fellow peers. I think among them,
Oh, Mike.
Who's
Hold down the table.
Who got the mic?
I don't know.
I can grab it. I think I know where it is. Is this connected? Is this good? I've heard some crazy things here at Berkeley. I want to know what the rest of you have heard here. I think the craziest I heard is in my American politics class, someone arguing that abortion lowers crime, which is really just the most outrageous statement.
Was their argument because they're aborting black babies?
Well, their argument is just, it's really been shown that wherever there's abortion, crime really tends to go down. And
Well, I mean, I know we're not, we have different opinions on abortion.
Yeah.
We're not an anti-abortion organization, but I do think it's important to note, speaking about the black community and abortion, black babies are aborted at a rate 4 times that of white babies. So you do have to reckon with this. I mean, it's not really answer to your question,
Yeah.
but I don't think enough people realize this. If you are for minorities, if you are for the black community, and you're also for abortion, I think women deserve better than that. I think black Americans deserve better than that. And imagine where the black American population would be right now if we did not have women aborting their black children at that high of a rate. So just an interesting tidbit there, but I'll let
I was
other
just going to
people
ask,
field your question.
do you guys have any Berkeley horror stories from today?
We were told we're genociding. We did a genocide. We're committing
I
genocide.
wasn't aware.
With signs.
I wouldn't say horror stories. I mean, I actually personally enjoy it when things get really dicey, so like to me it's super fun. But I would say probably there were 2 incidents. One was one of the students grabbed our signs that we had, grabbed them and ran away with them. And Mikey and I learned that it's time for us to go
out
on
of shape.
It's time to go on Ozempic because we tried as hard as we could to chase after them, and we did recover like 80% of the signs because he just kept
Only because he dropped them. That is no credit to us.
Well, it went on for like 3 blocks, and it was like uphill, and he was hiding behind a dumpster with our signs. And then he peeked out from behind the dumpster and saw that we were still, as best as we could, running toward him. And so then he started running again, and then he started just jettisoning the signs. And he made it away with like 1 or 2, but we got the rest of them back. And the other was that there was like a 50-year-old gay student who just kept coming over and like blasting music and screaming and like going into hysterics. And at one point, I think he hit her in the head or something, and he shoved into us. But
It's always the bitchy guys.
always, yeah.
I mean, we laugh about it, but it is really unfortunate. And this was not the majority of people, but it is awful that that's the response. I had a man, I mean, I've heard worse, but it was someone came up to me, an older gentleman, and said I'm a Nazi and a racist because I was holding a sign that said "Stop transing kids." And I think that's a horrible thing to say to someone you don't know. You don't even know what they're here for, what they're talking about. And it's just, I mean, we've all got it. I'm sure people in the room have got it. It literally just for changing your mind and voting a certain way and, you know, wanting to protect children. And it's not even about whether we agree, but to call someone, and we just rattle these words off like they're meaningless now, you know, Nazi and racist. And I think it's just such a horrible thing, and nothing good will come from that. And all it does is really, because we are growing, you know, people are walking away from the Democrat Party, and all it does is kind of like reinforce your decision to walk away when you are, because I've never called someone that for voting Democrat or disagreeing with me. I know that it happens, everyone's human, but I don't see that as much. When you leave the Democrat Party, I see more diversity of thought on this side and ability to disagree on different subjects like abortion or whatever the case may be. It's not over there because, you know, like I said, my experience, I checked all the boxes, believed everything, all the LGBT, but had a question about why can't I go to work, and then I was persona non grata. So it's like you can check all the boxes, but if you misstep at all, and that is very cult-like, actually, then you will be, they will come after you, even if you know, agree with everything else. So that is a problem, and, you know, just observation.
Yeah. Were you about to say something?
Oh God, the other day I had a MAGA hat on and this little old man with his wife come by and he had some words for me and he was like, "You need to see a psychiatrist." I was like, that's probably true for other reasons, but I was like, why? He's like, "That hat represents hate. You must hate gay people." It's like, I am a gay people. But
you do.
I mean, that is kind of true.
Yeah, but you do.
But I just find it so funny that it's like, it's straight people telling gay people how to think. It's white liberals telling black people how they have to think. They really do think that minorities are like their, not just their property, but like their little make-a-wish kids.
Mm-hmm. Can I say something?
Yeah.
Because you mentioned the Democrat Party and emotional manipulation. One of the things that kept being brought about in my conversation today was this idea that truth is subjective and it just depends on who you're talking to and what society you live in. And the thing about that is, like, if that's the case and truth is subjective, you can also say the same thing about hate speech. Like, what do you mean by hate speech? You can just literally fill in the blank to support whatever agenda, whatever narrative that you have. So people were coming up to me and saying, "You're hateful." I'm like, well, what do you mean by hateful? And so is being hateful telling the truth? It was in regards to the transing the kids thing. Mm-hmm. And so they said, well, you're hateful. I said, well, I love people enough that I'm going to tell them the truth. If that hurts their feelings, that's a different conversation. But if you're saying hateful, then where are you getting that authority from to make the rules that something is hateful, you know? Mm-hmm. And that gives politicians so much power, because then they can label someone as a Nazi or a racist or whatever, and the common folk will hear that and say, well, obviously I'm not going to vote for them. Like, the amount of people that I was talking to today that all they had to talk about was Trump. And I said, okay, but can you tell me about, like, who you're supporting? Do you know about Agenda 2030? And no one knew what I was talking about. They just kept saying Project 2025. And I'm like, well, that's the problem. It's like you're so focused on hating the other side that you don't even know what's going on behind your back, because they're just pulling on our heartstrings, essentially.
I do think that there's obviously like bias on, you know, if you watch Fox News, of course, you're going to see some sort of slant or bias in a conservative direction. Like, I don't deny that whatsoever. I do think, and I think studies have even shown, that the majority of the mainstream media is overwhelmingly, I mean, like 90% leftist or Democrat. Do I even remember why I just brought this point up? What did you just say?
Conservative.
I have no idea.
It's okay, because I didn't. I'll come back to it. It'll come back to me in a second. But you were making a point earlier about like conversations that you have with people, and your reasons why for walking away. And it's always astounded me that when I made the decision to walk away, to this day, it's now been like 7.5 years since I left. I did lose more than 90% of my friends. People stopped inviting me to barbecues and like, you know, parties and get-togethers, and stopped returning my phone calls and text messages, whatever. But I, to this day, have literally never had one single person reach out to me and say, "Tell me why you changed your mind." Mm-hmm. Like, help me understand why you changed your mind. And like, even if we can't agree about it, or even if we have like an argument or a debate about it, the point I was going to make about the media was something along the same lines. But I think although I think that there's bias on both sides, I do think that there's probably, I think, more of a willingness, I think, from people on, oh, I know what it was, I got it, boom. There's a woman today that I was arguing with out in the courtyard, and it was amazing to me because I knew based off of every word coming out of her mouth what shows she watches. Like, I knew exactly. And the thing is, like, I don't really feel like that exists so much on the other side. The thing that really scares me about a lot of people on the left, and I'm not going to generalize and say everyone, but a significant number of people on the left, is the willingness to just lap up and absorb whatever the talking point is of that particular day. I mean, the moment that they told everyone to start saying insurrection, the left started saying insurrection. The moment that they said Trump is going to be a dictator on day one, oh my God, he's going to be a dictator on day one, oh my God. And this woman that I was arguing with today, she was literally just like regurgitating every new talking point that's come out in the last like 2 or 3 weeks, because they're really ramping up the rhetoric about him being a dictator and a neo-Nazi and a tyrant and all this. And if he gets elected, it's going to be, you know, this. I mean, they've been saying that for a while, but it's getting really bad because I personally believe they're actually trying to get him killed, and it's heading more and more in that direction. But it's really disturbing, I think, when you're having a conversation. I kept telling this woman, I was like, I feel sorry for you because you've really handed on a silver platter a significant portion of your brain to the media and just allowed them to have it. You just gave it to them, and you're brainwashed, and you don't even know that you're brainwashed. I'm not brainwashed, you're brainwashed. Oh my God, he's gonna be a dictator on day one. Didn't you hear him say it? I'm like, it's gonna be a bloodbath. He said it's gonna be a bloodbath. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't with you. Go ahead.
Speaking of, I mean, they're the ones committing the bloodbath. You see Joe Biden giving his speech with the red background. He looked like friggin' Lucifer. And I mean, at this point with Trump, one thing, by the way, that I think is very interesting is Democrats claim that they're running on our democracy. They're saving not just democracy, our democracy. Our democracy.
Yeah.
They always got to market their slogans.
It's fragile.
Yeah, but I think it's very interesting. They have tried to get Donald Trump thrown off the ballot. They tried to get RFK thrown off the ballot. They tried to get Jill Stein thrown off the ballot. Sounds like
Sanders.
Communism to me.
Yeah.
Well,
And
also
I mean-
they have a nominee who wasn't nominated by
Yeah, oh yeah, how did I forget that?
That's also which actually Black Lives Matter called out on Twitter when they've been on a big campaign against that, which I actually admire them for, because we have a nominee of one of the major parties who not a single American voted for, which I don't think is democratic.
That was the broken clock being right.
Yeah, yeah.
And who actually ran in 2020 and was like one of the lowest polling candidates on the Democrat ticket at a time when there were like 38 people running on the Democrat ticket, and I think she was polling below like 1%. Was zero?
Zero delegates.
Right, 0 delegates. Yeah, and 0 primary votes. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I know a lot of like.
Oh, can we wait for the mic, please?
I'm not sure what it was.
It's for the camera.
Oh, it's the camera? Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So I noticed a lot of your changing your mind has come from like kind of realizing the institutions are corrupt or whatever, and like end up losing your trust in institutions. Do you think that there's any like role for institutional conservatives to play in the political movement, like people who have conservative beliefs who still like have trust in our institutions and kind of reject the kind of right-wing populism that's kind of grown in the last couple of years? Do you think there's any purpose or any like role for institutional conservatives?
I was just going to ask what that would be, because when you say that rejects right-wing populism, to me that just sounds like the status quo, the same thing that we have, that they might as well be Democrats, because it really was the flip side of right-wing populism that was on board with the lockdowns and the mandates and all of that.
Yeah, can I clarify? Yeah, for sure. When I mean institutional conservative, I mean that someone who believes that like there's a lot of media like bias, but like at the end of the day, like they're telling what they think is the truth, and so overall we're gonna like, if you just like, it's not like, oh, the government, everyone's like lying to you. It's more so that they're misinformed, or maybe like they just get stuff wrong occasionally. It's not like that everyone's like lying to you, if that makes sense.
Oh,
But
I disagree.
Are you defining an institutional conservative as like somebody who was a conservative before the kind of populist movement towards Trump? Is that what you're saying?
Kind of like someone who has social conservative views, like on like LGBT. Someone who has like socially conservative views, stuff like on LGBT rights and stuff like that. But like overall, like still has trust in the institutions and like wants to be a Republican but really can't because of like the populism that's kind of taken over the party, if that makes sense.
No, I get it. And my answer to that, I guess, would be that I think, especially probably for the people on this panel, we walked away from a party that we really believed in at one point, and maybe we did kind of go on autopilot. I mean, I'm sure I probably did, and I wasn't really like looking under the hood as carefully as I should have been. But I think once you get to the point where you realize that you're walking away from a party or a system that's become corrupt, the last thing in the world you want to do is join more tribalism. So, I mean, I personally am a big fan of a diverse and broad spectrum of opinions. I think we need a healthy two-party system, and I think we even need healthy diversity of thought within the political parties. I mean, there is kind of a civil war, obviously, that's been happening within the Republican Party for a long time between the establishment versus MAGA, right, or America First, or whatever you want to call it. But I don't think I joined the Republican Party because of MAGA, and I do consider myself to be, and I am an America First Republican. But I have issues with MAGA too. And so I would want to think that anybody who feels strongly about something and is passionate about their political beliefs would have a voice, and that there would be a place for anybody to have a healthy input in the dialogue and the conversation.
Yeah, I think a reckoning is happening right now on the right that I don't think is happening amongst Democrats, because they push you out, like RFK and Tulsi and everyone else. Obviously, there are people who are very socially conservative and don't like a lot of what Trump has done, don't like a lot of the populism. And it is hard navigating that, because you don't want to lose your values. Obviously, the Republican Party recently changed their platform on a couple things, and that ruffled some feathers. But I think that right now we have a choice, and there is a clear lesser of two evils. Every time it's a lesser of two evils, no matter who you're voting for, because they're not Christ, so it's a lesser of two evils. We're all sinful. And I think what that is the more we become the big tent, whether it is right-wing populism or MAGA or traditional social conservatism, you're more likely to bend someone's ear as opposed to when they're all the way over there, because the Democrats are becoming increasingly radical, increasingly left, and there is no room over there for you to be a moderate, for you to be a centrist. So everyone is kind of like naturally gravitating over here. And ultimately, I think that's a good thing, but it does cause concern. I'm a pretty conservative person. It does cause concern, and I think that that's valid. And it's kind of like navigating that, and I think we're still figuring it out. But it is an interesting thing that we kind of had like a mini civil war during the primary, because some people really didn't want, and they're still writing in other people, And again, that's not happening on the other side. So I think we're going to end up healthier for it, stronger for it. I personally don't think that Trump is the end-all be-all. He's not going to be here for forever, probably maybe not very long at all if they have their way. So we have to navigate it, without him, and figure it out without him, what it means to be, a patriotic American, and what it means to be a conservative, and what it means to be a Republican, et cetera. I don't know if that answered your question, but I think we're still kind of like figuring it out, and I see both sides of it. Yeah.
Yes.
So I engaged with most of you this afternoon, and I tend to agree with a lot of things you guys are saying, but something really struck me with one of you guys I spoke to. I said, why, my question with framing these posters and kind of, in my opinion, I believe it was kind of antagonizing to college students, and I don't believe that's right. I think the response I got was, well, the left is doing it, why can't the right do it? And this kind of, I've had my rude awakening too, just like you guys. I've had my own disillusionment, and I'm not a citizen of the U.S. That's how bad it is, right? Like the fact that I have my own awakening, not being an American. But my issue was that would it be right to use the tit for tat strategy? If the left is doing it, the right should do it, or would it be better as as an organization, as a party, as people of the party, to kind of say that, hey, they're doing this and this and this. Let's not do that. Let's approach this with maturity, with sensibility, with rational thought, with all these different, viable things. Instead of, oh, if they do it, let's do it. Because sometimes these right-wing movements, although very well-meaning, as I tend to be one of the few guys that can see the underlying message, and I tend to agree with it. What I disagree with, and kind of want to get your perspective, you guys' perspective on how maybe you guys would want to change or approach it, going to other campuses or other institutions, where, how do you intend to work on framing things to kind of invite constructive, healthy conversation instead of just antagonizing? The reactions we saw from students today. Oh yeah, the reactions we saw today were more hostile than productive. We can all agree on that. I think the guy kicking down that sign you mentioned, and the guy blasting music in front of the interview, like that's not civic mindedness, right? That is kind of, I believe that's the woke mind virus, right? But my question would be, how would you guys want to approach framing your kind of ideology in a way where it invites constructive conversation rather than hostility and
I answered this question earlier. I don't think you liked my answer. I don't know. Do you want to go? I don't mind saying it again, but if you want to go first or.
Oh yeah, we kind of spoke about it earlier, and I don't think I'm necessarily the person who gave you that answer. I think I took your feedback. I think number one, we do want people to stop and talk to us. And number two, I think no matter what, some people are going to be hostile because we are saying strong opinions that even if they're not inflammatory, they are inflammatory to certain people because they can't accept any kind of difference of opinion or you're a Nazi, you know, etc. But I mean, I don't know. I think it is a valid point too that some of this stuff has been said to us in reverse. And I see your side, but I also think, again, this is also like a reckoning that's happening. I believe that Democrats only care about power, and they are willing to use the rules to their advantage. I don't know if everyone else is doing that right now. And I don't want to continue to lose. I want to win. I want good people in power. I see your point, like isolated on college campuses and having, discussions, which I think is what we're having right now. I think it's harder to have that in the context of a quad with signs in the heat and all that. That's harder and people yelling. This is a little bit easier. But I also think that there is room for us being more fierce because I do want to see good people with sane and rational ideas who actually know what a woman is to be in charge. And so I don't know that we need to always, I mean, I'm a Christian, so this is hard to navigate. We take the high road so much and we follow the rules and, you know, like if Trump gets in office, I don't think he's going to go after, you know, politically persecute his rivals. He didn't lock her up. You know, there was chanting of lock her up. He didn't say that. He never locked her up, and look at where we are now and what they're trying to do to Trump. I think that we kind of need to push back a little bit and use the rules to our advantage sometimes. And I know that's different than what you're asking, but I kind of think we need to like balls up a little bit. Yeah, I mean, there's room for that. So just a different perspective.
Yeah, that was really good. I think the other thing that I would add is it's not necessarily that we're trying to do to them what they did to us. It's that do we value free speech or do we don't? And I think if you have some type of a sign that's going to welcome a certain reaction, that doesn't mean that these people have to act on that reaction. And these politicians, they're banking on this sort of visceral response so then they can count on you to vote for censorship, for example. So instead of you calling me, I was called a dickhead, a hoe, like a bunch of things today, and it's like, just answer the question. Let's talk about the ideas. Let's work through the ideas. Let's have a conversation. And instead we got, you know, what we had today, which some conversations were good, some were not. But I think that's the point is if we value free speech and we're on a university campus, which is the most alarming thing, we should be able to talk about these things.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like you sort of articulated my perspective probably a little bit in a, you know, kinder way than I did.
That's
I mean,
what I'm
not
here
that it was like
for.
that bad, but yeah. I mean, it's essentially sort of what I said to you as well. I mean, your point was like, okay, well, if it's bad when the left does it, why would you then turn around and do it too? And I mean, essentially what I said to you before is that, and remember, I didn't vote for Trump in 2016. I voted for Hillary, and I was one of the people lashing out at Trump supporters until I ultimately left in like 2017, and then I voted for Trump in 2020. But I've been a Trump supporter now longer than I wasn't a Trump supporter. And I've sat around and I've watched as people for, you know, like 8 years have taken the high road, tried to be the nice person, you know, tried to you know, just basically say like, oh, if we just, you know, extend a hand in kindness and we, you know, and as far as I'm concerned, it's gotten worse.
Right.
It's not gotten better, it's gotten worse. And by the way, this idea that like, I can't tell you the number of people on camp, and by the way, I probably interacted with at least 100 kids today, and I kept hearing from so many of them, you know, like, words have power and you should think about the way that you say things, and I think that, you know, saying things in a hyperbolic way it's not nice and it's not kind. And I'm like, do you understand like how many times you guys have called us Nazis, racists, bigots, Hitler lovers, whatever? Well, yeah, but yeah, and I'm
Words
like,
have power. Yeah.
so why is it okay when you do it and it's not? And I honestly think that we're to this point, and frankly, you know, maybe getting people a little incensed with like a sign is not even actually tit for tat as far as I'm concerned, because they're at the point now where they're actually like raiding people, locking people up, putting people in jail, and destroying people's lives, and weaponizing our justice system to literally destroy people. I mean, we're just giving them a taste of the rhetoric that they use against us all the time.
And none of our signs, I mean, not to play victim, because we willingly came and we enjoyed it, I think, and nobody made us do it. But none of our signs warranted some of the reactions we got. I mean, even the most, whatever you would find the most egregious ones didn't warrant it. I was holding one that said reject black privilege, and someone told me that I want to genocide black people. I mean, to get from A to Z like
Sorry,
that
Vanessa.
is a little bit, I can see if you have a truly egregious sign, a truly awful sign, something very, you know, like something actually Nazi, that would be. But none of our signs deserved some of the responses that we got. So I think that also has to be on the table too, while I do think that you have,
Can I
you
say
know, a
one more thing
valid
real quick?
concern.
Sorry,
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're totally fine. You know, so, you know, obviously, Mikey and I are both gay men, you know, and if we had been, if we were gay kids today, I think we would very much be at risk of this new sweeping trend to trans any kid who exhibits any signs of being, you know, effeminate or masculine or, you know, not normative in some way, which is really odd, I think, for a party that celebrates its non-normativeness. But there is kind of this epidemic that's happening now of people being considered trans who are not actually trans. And we all have different opinions about different things. I personally am totally supportive of if somebody wants to transition from male to female or male to female to male, whatever. I totally support that. I have no issue with that whatsoever. But we have parts of the country now where like 25% of teenagers are identifying as part of the LGBTQI community, and it's because they're considering themselves to be transgender when they're not transgender, because there's a social contagion. This has become
Mind virus.
well, yeah, absolutely. It's become like a trend. So, you know, we had a sign today, and like, believe me, we were like laughing our asses off when we made this sign. But it said, "You're not trans. You're just autistic." And
Thank you.
it's funny, right?
Thank you.
Yeah. But the reason why, okay, obviously there was a nicer way to say that, right? But if I made a sign that said, "Did you know that there are people in this world who are preying on autistic kids and telling them that they're transgender," that, like, how many people would stop and have a conversation with me about that sign?
Yeah.
But we had so many people come up to us because we had a sign that said, "You're not really trans, you're just autistic." And they were like, "What?" You know, and then we had an opportunity to explain what we meant by that, and to explain that we're not just doing this because it's fun to make people mad.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing this because there are actually like lesbian and gay people who are having their bodies permanently mutilated as children because people are telling their parents or teachers or whatever that this is a transgender child. When in fact, if that child were allowed to grow up, in all likelihood, they would outgrow what they feel to be their gender dysphoria. That's just one example.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, what were you going to say?
I want to say, in terms of the woke mind virus, I mean, you look at some of these people, not talking about anybody in this room who might disagree with us. I appreciate you guys being here. But some of these people that we encounter on a day-to-day basis are truly possessed. And so you need to know the minds you can change and the minds you can't change. And there is no amount of gingerly speaking words and tap dancing around things that will ever make them not act like the demons they appear to be. And I just completely reject this idea that the right needs to be more fragile and more soft. We've had too much of that. When it comes to the woke mind virus, there's the only thing these people understand is strength. The two things that beat the woke mind virus, strength and humor. And those are the two things I believe in the most.
Yeah.
Hey, so a question. I think I talked to you guys earlier today as well. A question when it comes to Trump, not about his policies, but about his rhetoric. So, don't you think that he's bad for American culture when he says things like they're eating the dogs, and that leads to an uptick in violence against, you know, Haitian immigrants? When he says, like during 2020, when he kept calling, you know, the coronavirus the China virus, and that led to an uptick in violence against Asian people, and we saw Asian women getting killed in the streets, and the murderers using, you know, citing the reason as being, oh, you know, we were scared they were going to give us the China virus. So don't you think his rhetoric is polarizing and, you know, I'm not going to say hateful, but polarizing and purposefully so, it hurts American culture, and it stops people from engaging faithfully across the aisle.
No.
Okay.
Why?
Again, no, we'll give you an answer. But again, I have to start. I actually want to answer your actual question. But before I answer your actual question, I have to again flip it and reverse it and say to you, like literally every single day, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, Nancy Pelosi, you name it, are going on television now, and it's ramping up more and more and more, telling people that Donald Trump is a tyrant, a dictator, Hitler. That is inflammatory rhetoric that has actually led to him being shot, and an attempt to try to murder him. And we have now found another attempted assassin in the bushes outside of his home. I don't know the full story of what happened with this latest thing. It sounds like it wasn't an assassination attempt. But, I mean, why are we not talking about that inflammatory rhetoric, which has actually led to attempts to murder this political candidate? Now to answer your actual question. Many people have reported that that's what they witnessed in Ohio. When did we determine that didn't happen? No, go ahead, please. I'd love to hear from you.
I think so. If you look at the facts, there was like maybe one recorded case of that happening. He made a vast generalization, and also, I'm sorry, but you asked me a question right about why aren't we talking about the left's rhetoric about.
Yeah.
But to be clear, he also didn't say Haitians. He said they're eating the cats and dogs.
Yes, and
which
he
could
named
be
a specific city, and the immigrants in that city.
He did
are
not
Haitian.
name the immigrants in the city.
He didn't
said
name the immigrants, but he
they're
named the
eating
city.
the cats and dogs.
Yeah, and that, I mean, there's obviously
Who's they?
implication. It's a very obvious implication. It's not hard to decipher what he meant. And the uptick in violence is obviously because people, correctly assume that that was the implication in his statement.
But can I ask about the uptick in violence? Like, what is it?
Right.
Well, so there have been, there's been more hate crimes against Haitian immigrants in, I don't remember the name of the city.
Springfield.
In Springfield, Ohio. And there have been recorded hate crimes. You can look it up.
And it says who? The FBI on Twitter?
Right, and I
Sorry,
mean,
if you don't trust the FBI, like what institution do you have?
sooner
Whose
trust
word are you
well,
willing
first of all, we do not reporting to the FBI is voluntary, and we're missing data from LA, from New York, from the most populous states, the most populous cities. It is voluntary,
Well, but we're
and the
talking about
FBI
one
has
specific
admitted
city,
that.
though.
Secondly, the crimes against Asians were majority done by Black Americans. And that has been a long-standing issue. I know you're looking at me like that because the media painted it as a bunch of white conservatives who were freaked out about coronavirus. But in fact, it's uncomfortable to talk about, but there's been a long-standing issue between Asian Americans and Black Americans. And that has been there for a long time
I'm
before
not
COVID,
saying-
and I don't want anyone to be harmed. But to blame that on Donald Trump, I think is a bridge too far, especially when the rhetoric has been heightened for a very long time. Now, I'll be honest, I don't know about any heightened crime against Haitians, and that's not what I want. But I also think that words have power, absolutely, but so do policies. We have Americans suffering because we have let in everybody, and we've called everybody a refugee, regardless of their status, and we have not vetted people. And so do I think that Americans should be committing violence at all against someone because they think they might be this or that? Absolutely not. But this is part of what I was talking about earlier. A secure border is humane for the people on the other side of the border and for us. And unfortunately, you are inviting that because we'll never get rid of sin. We'll never get rid of racism in the individual. We can only have legislation that, doesn't discriminate. That's all we can do. We cannot get rid of the hate in people's hearts overwhelmingly. But when you have these policies that are impacting Americans and everything is heightened up and people can't afford stuff, and then, we are letting in people. We do have 300,000 children who've gone missing at the border and are probably sexually trafficked. Stuff happens. And I think blaming that on Donald Trump saying they're eating the cats and dogs, which is kind of a silly thing to say, but just they're eating the cats and dogs, personally, I find that absurd. I think Trump is the scapegoat for everything. I appreciate your question, but I think he's the scapegoat
I'm not
for everything.
saying, we can talk about, immigration policies, but my point is, you can say we want to shut down the border, you can say, we should stop letting immigrants in, and that's okay, that's a policy discussion, and we can talk about that. But my point is that there are already immigrants in America, and Trump's anti-immigrant rhetoric makes it worse for those people because the people who go out and commit crimes whose, violence has been harnessed by Trump's rhetoric.
But it's an issue when we let in, but it is an issue when we let in people who, the Haitians were let in as refugees. It's an issue when we let in people who do not assimilate, who have no matter what the color is. That is an issue. And Haitians do eat different animals. And he said they're eating the cats and dogs. I have no idea whether Haitians in America, in Springfield, Ohio, are eating people's pets. But some people have reported this, and we just completely, I don't want violence, but why does the media immediately shut it down that this might be happening when we have let in millions of people and we don't vet them, we don't have them assimilate, we
Well,
don't
again,
have them do
see, the
anything.
problem is you keep talking about a policy issue, and I'm talking about his rhetoric. So
Because
you can
policies
say,
matter.
You can say we want to shut down the border, but when he says things like, immigrants are stealing everyone's jobs, they're going to come in.
He's
and
never said that. First of all,
he did
he's
say
never
during the
said that.
debate. He did say
I'm
that.
sure Rachel
He said
Maddow
immigrants
told
are
you he
stealing
said that, but
American
he's never
jobs.
said that.
He verbatim said immigrants are stealing American jobs.
He said what?
He said
Immigrants are stealing American jobs.
He said they're taking black jobs.
They are stealing American.
They are.
Well, I'm sorry, but
Black Americans are the first and the most impacted by illegal immigration because, and the left will tell you this, the left will tell you that Black Americans are the ones who are at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder. They'll just claim that all the time. Well, when you're working a minimum wage job and then someone else comes in and will do it for less and do it under the table and do it for longer hours and doesn't know what his or her rights are and is not a citizen, well then the people who are going to be priced out of jobs quickest are unfortunately predominantly Black men. So again, we're talking about these policies where the left claims to be for these people, but their policies harm these people. And it's all under this veil of compassion. And so personally, I would rather have a man who maybe misspeaks sometimes and says, oh, they're eating the cats and dogs, but has good policies because these policies are actually harming people. And 100% Black Americans' jobs are being, all of our jobs are, but Black Americans first. And that matters. That is a fact. That is a fact. And Black economists will tell you that too.
I'm not disagreeing with the facts. I'm making a different argument, and you refuse to address what I'm saying.
I've addressed your point that words do matter, and there's always room for people to be more careful with their words, but he said they're eating the cats and dogs. I'm not going to say
When he kept calling this China virus, there was an uptick in violence against Asian Americans.
the virus
From
came
who?
from China, and that came from...
You're right. I'm sorry. I want to ask.
It absolutely matters.
I want to ask about this mystery violence that you keep talking about because this is really remarkable to me. Because the left has been so desperate to show Trump supporter violence for 8 years that they've literally had to make up hate crime hoaxes. Everyone had the biggest hard-on when Jussie Smollett told them that he was attacked by Trump supporters when he got his Subway sandwich, and it turned out to be a lie. If Haitian migrants were being attacked by MAGA people, we would be watching it on a 24-hour
That's
loop
true.
on CNN every single day. So what are you talking
good
about? You
point.
don't get to just say like, oh, this terrible thing is happening because of Trump.
I'm saying
Where's
you can,
the evidence?
You can look at the statistics. Okay, so if you look at the statistics from 2021, I believe, you look at the crime statistics in large cities, because Trump kept calling it the China virus, there was an increase in the homicide of Asian people, specifically Asian women. Right? And now you can say, oh, those two things were unrelated. Oh, it was a pre-existing issue. And sure, that of course Asian people were killed before that as well. But there was an increase in those homicides because of his rhetoric.
Do you
And
think
because
that
of
maybe
the way-
that had to do with people being forced to stay home? People like the story I just told.
I think
Not
that-
that
I
that's
think
a reason to
I
do
think people
violence,
were-
but wasn't violence kind of heightened? So again,
I
how...
think people were frustrated because they were
Right.
staying home. And when Trump said China virus, they found an outlet for their violence through his rhetoric. I think that's what happened. They were absolutely frustrated.
Okay, could I ask you? Okay, so you're talking about like the statistics of who was harmed or assaulted or killed or whatever.
Homicides, yes.
Homicides. Okay, great. So like, do we know who committed the homicides? Because do you remember what else was going on in 2020?
Yes, there were protests going on. I remember.
Protests. Protests. Real, yeah.
No, but that wasn't the
Looked like insurrections to
The
me.
homicides that happened did not happen at the protest. You can go look at the data. Like I mean,
I don't have to look at the data. I watch the videos every day on social media of the most heinous violence that's ever taken place in this country. Thousands of people were injured. Dozens of people were killed. I mean, this idea that a bunch of white people in MAGA hats were going
I
and
didn't say it
beating
was white
Asian
people.
women.
I never said it was white people. I just said homicides
Inspired
of
by
Asian
Trump.
people. Inspired by Trump. Yes.
Well, do you hold yourself to your same standard, though, when in 2020 people were getting killed and harmed and having their businesses burned down in the BLM riots, when all these Democrat politicians were bailing them out, were telling them, don't let up, keep protesting in the middle of riots? Is
Well,
there
so
any
I-
responsibility on them
Absolutely,
for that?
and I think there's absolutely a right to peaceful protest, but people who go and loot and burn down stores in protest should also be arrested.
No, but I'm saying
I agree
you're
with
coming
you
here
there.
talking about Trump's rhetoric and
rhetoric.
not saying anything about their rhetoric that is having actual violence and actual real-world input when it's to the point that people are shooting at Trump now.
Well, okay, the guy who shot at Trump wasn't affiliated, well, he wasn't registered with either party.
Clearly, he hated Donald Trump. I think we can agree with that, right?
Yeah,
the man
but that
hated
doesn't
Donald
make him,
Trump.
like, just,
He
okay, yes,
donated
hated
to
Donald
the
Trump.
Democrat
You
Party,
don't
I
know
mean.
anything about him. Like,
I know that he hated Donald Trump, and it was unjustified.
well, I wouldn't say
I know that.
justified that he hated Donald Trump.
Well, it was unjustified that he shot him,
Absolutely.
and the
It was
reason he
unjustified that he-
hated him was based off of lies for 10 years.
How
That's
do you
a
know that it was
rat.
based on, have you talked to him? How do you know?
Because it's all lies.
That's just not true.
It's all lies.
Hold on.
There's no reason to hate someone to
Hold
that
on.
level.
I
It's
don't
all
think he
lies.
should have shot him, but I don't think it's unjust to hate Donald Trump.
But
Oh, well,
You,
to the
you
point
just
of.
asked, did you talk to him? Did you talk to know why he was motivated or whatever is that we said? But you were just implying that there was an increase in Haitian crimes and that his rhetoric motivated them. Did you talk to these people?
Yes, because they have come out and made statements that said, you know, Trump said that it was the China virus. We were scared we were going to get the China virus, so we killed these people.
I'm talking
There have
about
been
Haitians,
documented
the
cases
Haitian
of that.
stuff,
Huh?
the uptick.
I'm not that sure about the Haitian stuff, but for the Asian stuff, I definitely am sure that happened.
Can I say something? First, like if you want to say that Trump inspired someone to kill Asian, you have to prove that C, prove A, prove B. If you can't prove that a person like Trump inspired those people to hate and to kill those people, you don't have evidence to that. If you can say, you can make like the day Trump say about that, and then after that, it's really increased. You can prove that, but you didn't have like any statistic to show that Trump inspired those people or those people do by themselves. So you are unreasonable and uneconomically ruthless.
I totally agree. Yeah, we can go ahead.
It was more of a comment, not a question, but I'm sure it's uncomfortable for someone to ask a question and then be in a room where most people don't think like you.
That's true.
And so I also want, there are always multiple sides to an argument, and I think it's important that every opinion is welcome and that, there's always, I don't want you, for example, to feel like you're being jumped on, because I'm sure that most people here have been in situations where everyone else is jumping on them. So I want to make sure that, it's brave of you to voice your opinion, and I think there are multiple ways of looking at things. So I just wanted to acknowledge that.
I have a question. First of all, I absolutely agree with what you said. That's a 100% true statement. Second of all, have you guys seen Jimmy Kimmel, where they ask people on the street where Alaska is or what the state is, and it's Florida or something, and they won't get it. It's the same thing as what you guys are tabling, in my opinion. When you table, you're fielding like the most moronic people on this campus, and there are some stupid people here who somehow managed to slip by the admissions office, and like you have to realize that. So I think if you're not open-minded enough to accept their opinion, this is from an Aristotle quote that I'm paraphrasing, then you really aren't that smart. So Mr. Straka, you had a very powerful anecdote about your friends and how they effectively left you once you voiced your opinion.
Yep.
I think they're pretty stupid for that. Honestly, like in all due respect, like I think they're pretty stupid. I think they're morons. But in the same light, I'm actually relatively liberal. I have pretty liberal friends, but I'm from Florida. So I have friends who go from liberal, but all the way to, oh, Hitler could have done it better. So I have like a pretty wide range of people that I talk to, yet they're able to talk to each other. And that's what I've always valued about my friend group. So maybe you just have to look for people. I agree with what you said as well. You're getting people who just won't change their mind. But there are people who will change their mind, and you really have to be confident about that. So that's my main issue now, is that how can you say that the entire Democrat Party is this? Or even generalize to most Democrats? Because I feel like you gave your anecdote, I'm giving you my anecdote. I have an anecdote of a lot of friends who are very willing to voice their opinions, but still manage to talk peacefully about it, about trans rights, about gay rights, about gun rights, about so many things. It just doesn't make sense to generalize to every person, just like you cannot faithfully generalize to all Republicans. It's just there's so many different varying levels of people, it doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, I understand that, but I mean, you have to understand. How old are you?
I'm a freshman, I'm 18.
Oh We're old. I thought you were probably. See, I'm like that age now where I can't tell if you're 12 or 25. No, I mean, you have to keep in mind that, again, we were all Democrats and for a very long time. And so I think that we watched the party trend in a certain direction more and more and more. And at a certain point, it became intolerable and too extreme for us. So obviously, we had to leave it. We felt like it was beyond repair and beyond recognition. But to say, I mean, your question is like, how can you generalize like that? Well, I mean, obviously, it's hyperbolic to say everybody's like this or the entire party is like this. But I think we've all watched the party head in one particular direction and go further and go further and go further. And at a certain point, if you're not willing to jump off the train like we have, then you're supporting the train. And you're supporting the train as it heads in that direction. And that direction is towards extremism and destruction. So, look, if you haven't gotten it yet, great. Obviously we wouldn't be doing what we're doing if we thought that people were beyond saving or beyond redemption. Like, I think that anyone can wake up and think for themselves. And obviously we encourage that. But no, I'm not going to give anybody any, awards or a ribbon for continuing to support this party when it seems so glaringly obvious to me at this point what they've become and where they're taking our country.
I don't think any of us have necessarily, maybe some of us misspoke, which happens, okay, Donald Trump does it too. I don't think any of us have necessarily said all Democrats are this way. In fact, I think earlier, while I may have been someone who misspoke, I think I said that the majority of people today were not the craziest of the craziest. So of course that means that all Democrats aren't this way. But there's an issue with the Democrat Party and the legacy media. I mean, when you think about it, every single institution, Hollywood, all the educational institutions, everything is pushing you towards Democrat. And there's only one side that if you voice your opinions, you're more likely to get canceled, you're not going to get a job, specifically in Hollywood, but even in other places. That doesn't happen with Democrats. So I don't think that the average American Democrat is evil, but I do think every single American Democrat is woefully misinformed. And I think the people at the top are manipulating us. But I don't think every Democrat is like not gonna listen and gonna just call me a racist. But that has unfortunately been a lot of our experience of losing a lot of our friends. But I don't think that every American Democrat, just your average everyday Joe, is evil. But I think he's misinformed. Even if he can have these conversations, which I think is really special that you have that, I think they're very, very misinformed. And they are, unfortunately, promoting a really awful agenda, So hopefully those conversations can take fruit.
Can I just also add, I think, because someone asked me today, they were like, why are you here? And I asked her, I said, do college kids not vote? Because you guys are going to get jobs, you're going to vote for the leaders of this country. And so even if, as you said, there are some moronic people on this campus, these people are still going to hold positions of influence and power someday. So even if we don't change their mind, at least we can plant a seed, because what I have noticed, and again, not a generalized thing, all of my family are still Democrats, right? And so, but what I've noticed is that a lot of people who associate with being a Democrat is they don't work through their ideas to consider the long-term consequences of those ideas. They think for the immediate gratification, and they don't consider what is this going to look like when we take this to its logical conclusion. Like the whole transing thing. Like, why are we having this discussion about kids being trans? Where did that ideology come from? And by the way, there's roots for where that ideology came from. It starts with Darwinism, so that's a fun thing to look up. But I think it's important for us to have these conversations. Even if they don't agree, maybe they'll think about it years down the line. Mm-hmm.
I think for me, it's not about each individual Democrat voter. It's about the power structure and the people in power, that maybe not every Democrat voter agrees with these things, but the media is in lockstep. The party is in lockstep. And I used to be a lot more tolerant. I used to be one of these people who was like, I don't care what anyone's politics are. I'll be friends with whoever. And that's who I want to be. But it got a lot harder when I was segregated. It got a lot harder when I didn't want to take a vaccine that I knew I didn't need, that I knew was not safe or effective, and I lost everything for it. I lost my job. I couldn't get the apartment I was going to get. You couldn't go anywhere. And it was a lot harder to, in the city that I was born in and lived my entire life in and thought I would never leave. It was a very tough pill to swallow.
And that is another thing about rhetoric. I know that, people have left, but that's another thing about rhetoric. I mean, remember them telling us that this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. And then, so, I mean, is there room for every single human on either side of the aisle, Trump included, because he's just a regular man and not God, to hone your rhetoric? Yeah, absolutely. Especially when you're talking that much, you're going to misstep and that kind of thing. And Trump certainly, he's just himself. I get that. But that's why I am focused on policies, because absolutely there is critiques on both sides about the rhetoric. And I think more so on a certain side is what I would argue. And we don't talk about that, what happened to unvaccinated people, what happened. We have Joe Biden and Kamala Harris calling them extreme MAGA, and he's Hitler and that kind of thing. So we could all pinpoint tit for tat, and I think that's maybe a worthy conversation, because to be more specific with your language. But again, the policies are what matter. The policies are what's harming people, because I really don't think that people are just hearing something and then going out and necessarily committing violence. That's why I'm focused on the policies, because look at what happened to you, what happened to everyone up here, and the way that they spoke about the unvaccinated or MAGA voters, etc.
Yeah, and before we go to the next question, I just wanted to address one thing you said too, when you're saying that you think my friends are stupid for turning their backs on me. Look, I'm going to generalize again, so you're probably going to hate this. I often say that I think that the more educated a liberal is, the more indoctrinated they are. I actually didn't go to college at all. I only have a high school graduation. I do actually think that that's highly instrumental in why I was able to see the truth and walk away, because I got it really early on. And I'm not trying to pat myself on the back or, like I'm no great genius or anything, but like, there are still people much smarter than me and much more educated than me that have stayed on the Trump hate train. And a lot of it is tied to their arrogance and their belief that their education somehow elevates them above other people, and that the indoctrination that they received in their university or their college, that they know something that the rest of us do not. And a lot of my friends at that time, I was living in New York City, I think I was the only person in my friend group who didn't have a college education, but the majority of them were PhDs, had master's degrees, highly educated people. But I have found that oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes, the more educated somebody is, the more resistant they are to changing their mind. And that if you actually have less education, you sometimes tend to be more open-minded and willing to change. And so I just wanted to point that out, because my friends are actually not stupid. They were really, really, really smart. They were just, I think, arrogant and unwilling to accept that somebody could change their, or that they could be wrong. Yeah. Yes, sir. We'll go to you next. I know you've been waiting. Yeah, we'll go to you next.
So I think I've heard from some of you guys. Huh?
Stand up.
Oh, stand up. I think I've heard from some of you guys, like a dislike for an echo chamber, or maybe even like hyper-partisanship, or like the idea that if I'm a Democrat and I believe something that's not traditionally Democrat, that's maybe going to cause me to get kicked out like this. That's something all of you have said. In the spirit of reducing polarization, which I think is important, I believe you guys might agree, what are some things that I'm hoping to hear each of you, that either specific policy things that you guys disagree either with the general Republican or Democrat, the general Republican status quo, or agree with the Democrat status quo, or disagree amongst yourselves, which I think
we
will
disagree
help.
on a lot.
Yeah, just one
actually.
or a few.
Who wants to go first?
Yeah, who wants to go first?
Well, I will say, I actually spoke with some students about this earlier. I personally, I'm torn on healthcare. I see both sides of the healthcare debate as someone who comes from a family that cannot afford healthcare, including aging parents. And so while I think socialized medicine is no bueno, I also feel like it's really bad when you can't just afford to go like treat your broken arm or something like that. So, I mean, maybe I'm a little bit different than, I don't know if I consider myself a Republican. Obviously, I'm a Trump supporter and a conservative, but I guess maybe I'm slightly different than Republicans in that way, to answer your question. And I do think we actually disagree on like quite a few things.
I may have misunderstood the question. So yeah, was
Something we disagree with Republicans on or with each other
Where
on.
we don't fall in line
So-
with
I thought
Republicans.
the question was about how to like bridge the gap of. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Sort of. I
I
just
don't
think
know.
that this might help bridge that gap. So, I think to the audience, or at least to me, the perception I get is that you guys are sort of like a Republican institution, I guess. But to combat that or to help bridge polarization, I'm asking a policy thing that you disagree with Republicans
Okay.
or agree with Democrats.
Well, I do think it's important to say that we won't bridge that gap as long as one side believes the other is Nazis, and we just think the other side is misinformed. You know, I mean, thinking you're misinformed, that can be helped. You thinking we're evil, and not you, but I mean, so
Yeah.
unfortunately, like, I don't actually think that bridge that gap can be bridged until that has to stop. Because if you think someone's a Nazi, you're not gonna be like, oh, you agree on socialized medicine, maybe.
Sure.
So you see what I'm saying? But yeah, well, certainly we don't necessarily fall in line with Republicans. I'll let you guys go all the time.
I think one big flaw of the Republican Party is that there are a whole host of issues where when Democrats have bad ideas, Republicans offer no ideas. Healthcare is a great example. I don't know what the Republican healthcare platform is at this point. I think there are a bunch of issues where they just offer nothing other than saying Democrats' ideas suck. Well, yeah, they suck, but I'm afraid people will choose bad ideas over no ideas. God, if we're going to bash Republicans, I could be here all day. They're weak. They're useless. They're horrible. Strategically, they're horrible with marketing. If we're talking about a policy I disagree with Trump on, red flag laws would be one of them. Hopefully he'll change his view on that. I don't know what the hell I agree with Democrats on at this point. Is there something? Can we find unification somewhere and find one thing?
I know that I do. I'm not gonna lie. I'm struggling right now, and I'm trying really hard.
There's got to be something.
There is. I know because I just can't think of it right now. But I will say, look, one thing I'll say is that there are many things that Democrats are passionate about that, like, the passion behind the issue, I kind of am there with them on. And then they go into this almost like religious ideology where they lose me. Like the climate. Like, I think it's a very noble cause to take good care of our planet, right? And to do whatever we can to ensure that our planet remains as healthy and thriving for as long as it possibly can. But then when you go into climate change and carbon emissions and how the whole thing becomes very sort of like pseudo-religious to me, you lose me at that point. But I mean, I could certainly find common ground with Democrats about like ecological issues and saving the planet and things. And there was another one I was just thinking. And in terms of the Republicans, it's interesting because I believe I'm with him. Like I am a registered Republican. The party bothers me very, very much for very, very many reasons. But I actually think that the party is becoming kind of more and more socially liberal as time goes on. So I'm actually having less and less contention with some of their policies. I did not like it when the Republican Party was extremely rigid on abortion for a number of reasons. I think it's a losing issue for the Republican Party. I think it's costing us elections. And I personally think that I actually know people, I'm friends with people who are the product of rape. So believe me, I understand the value of life, even if that life is conceived in a hideous, violent act. But I cannot fathom forcing somebody to carry a pregnancy when it is the product of a brutal and traumatic experience in their life. I can't do it. So I do think that there needs to be exceptions for abortions. I do think that there has to be a period of time of this.
And I couldn't disagree with you more. So we're not a hive mind. I very much disagree with that.
Yeah, totally. But the thing is, I think that more and more Republicans are trending in that direction. I think they're both realizing it's a losing issue, and I also think that they're just softening on exceptions.
I'll just add really quickly, my response is probably going to be the most radical on this
Yes.
panel, okay? I believe that, well, first of all, everyone here is operating on some type of worldview. So your moral justifications, when you go to vote, you're voting based off of your pre-existing worldview. So now the question is, whose worldview is the correct worldview? Me personally, I believe in God, and I believe that He is the standard of good. And I believe when a society deviates from that standard, you get chaos. And so what I believe about the Democrat Party is, to my knowledge, I can't think of anything I agree with them on. As far as Republican Party, there's lots of things I disagree with them on. This is why I say that I am not affiliated with any specific platform. I go where the truth is, and I have to recognize that there has to be an absolute standard for how humanity is supposed to operate. And if we deviate from that, we get the mess that we have now. And people could disagree with me on that. That's totally fine, but I think we're seeing the fruits of what that looks like.
Yeah.
This guy's been waiting very patiently. Yeah.
Hi, yeah, I think it's been really interesting hearing all of you guys' differences in terms of what you guys believe. But curious that you guys are all Trump supporters. I would probably characterize myself as being more of like a traditional conservative. But I think we can all kind of see still some issues with what Trump has done, not just his rhetoric, but also actions. So I kind of want to reconcile that, right? So I think one, we can talk about, for example, I'm from Georgia, by the way, so how we contacted, for example, the Secretary of Elections for both Georgia and Nevada. I think that's pretty purely unconstitutional to do that. You can't just go ahead and try to challenge elections, despite being your same party's candidate or not. Like, I think that's a pretty valid issue to talk about. I think also something that we can all agree is an issue is, for example, how Kamala just randomly came up on the ticket, kind of how Biden dropped out, right? So I think that's generally like accepted upon, but that was kind of a party practice, right? That's more of an issue within the party than it is within, for example, democracy, because it's the party's right to choose who kind of represents them on the ticket, as long as you're falling within the federal election guideline. I'd probably say Trump had a very similar issue, given the fact that he never attended a single one of the Republican debates, given the fact that he was not the incumbent president at the time. You might disagree on whether he won the 2020 election or not, but end of the day, he was not the incumbent at the time, and he chose not to go to those debates. I will give him some like leeway on, for example, the fact that he didn't attend like the presidential debates, given the fact that there was actually a candidate switch, right? So like I think that we can kind of come to consensus on. But given the fact that he never did a lot, first of all, he tried to violate and overturn the elections in a very unfair way. There's one thing if you want to do it like maybe through Congress or like have an appeal like that, but to directly contact the Secretary of Elections from multiple states and try to overturn, I really have an issue.
Talk about that?
Yeah, for sure.
What is your understanding of what happened on that phone call in Georgia? Can you give him, he needs the mic. Sorry. What is your understanding of what took place on that phone call in Georgia?
Right. So, and I could be wrong, so feel free. But based on my understanding, he was saying, "Hey, could you relook at the elections and recount the elections multiple times in places where the votes wasn't even close enough to be called a recount?"
Well, what's wrong with that, though? That's actually not what I expected you to say. But what is wrong with that?
I mean, there's certain policies.
He said, "Could you look at it again and just make sure?"
No, look at it again and to overturn some parts of it, right? So that's kind of what.
No, he never
happening.
said overturn anything.
Could you give me a rundown of what
I can.
happened?
Yeah. So. Was that the phone call you and I reenacted? No, that was the Ukraine phone call. Yeah. Mikey and I we actually got the transcript and like did a reading of it. But I feel like I'm one of the few people in the entire country who actually listened to the Georgia phone call. It's only an hour. But like I think 99% of the people in the country didn't listen to it, and so once again they're susceptible to the lies of the left-wing media. So many people in this country believe that Trump called the Georgia Secretary of State and the governor and told them, "I need you to find me 11,000 votes. I need you to." That's what you think?
Yeah.
You're wrong. That's not what happened. So what he did is they had compiled a list of abnormalities that had happened just in the state of Georgia. And this was a list that had been looked at by a lot of different people who'd gone through the election results, and they had them categorized, like votes that were tabulated by people who are dead. You know, there were like, 2,000 votes, 3,000 votes. Convicted felons, X number of votes. Illegal immigrants or people who moved out of the state, X number. So they had all these different categories, and then the list of numbers of the amounts of people, and it added up to a staggering number. I mean, I think it was something in the neighborhood of 80, 90, 100,000 votes or something like that. And so he, at that point, the narrative was that he was losing Georgia by 11,000 votes. And he was saying to them, look, we've already discovered X number of convicted felons. We've already discovered X number of dead people. People have moved out of the state. He said, I only need you to find me 11,000 votes. And he's like, I've got like 80, 90,000 or like illegitimate votes right here. I only need 11,000. He wasn't saying go out and find me 11,000 votes and make me the president. He was saying we have more than 11,000 and we can show you. And no one was interested in seeing it.
But given the fact that Georgia, at least it still is now, and at the time was controlled by Republicans, and in all levels of Congress. Why
Yeah,
don't
it was weird.
All levels of the state. Why do you think that wasn't changed or overturned, or like do you think there was do you think that was the real issue, or I'm just trying to get your thoughts on that?
I mean, there's no way to answer this without putting my tinfoil hat on. But I mean, I look at a situation like that, and all I can think of is that somebody got to him. I mean, look, if you're in a situation where you know the might of the media is behind Joe Biden, that things are trending in the direction that the Democrats are going to push Joe Biden into office come hell or high water, and you feel like there's a razor-thin possibility that Donald Trump, even if he rightfully won that election, he's not going to get inaugurated, just because all of the machines are in power. Are you going to side with the person that you know is going to become the president anyway, or are you going to side with the person that you know is going to lose? I think that there are oftentimes in politics situations in which the person knows they're doing the wrong thing, but they also know that the person that they would be doing the right thing for is not going to win or is going to get pushed out. So they're going to do the wrong thing knowing they're supporting the person who's going to take power. I can't say for sure that's what he did, but I can say that would be, I think, a reasonable explanation for why somebody would look at that situation and who's a Republican and not say and to Mikey's point, Republicans don't stand up for other Republicans. I'm living proof of that, and so are a number of other people. I don't know the answer, but I can tell you that's one explanation.
Well, and the thing is, you don't even have to put your tinfoil hat on. Read the Time magazine piece that they did, the history of the shadow campaign to fortify the election. It blatantly said there were people trying to control information, change voting laws, allow mail-in ballots, and this is where when we talk about things that maybe I'm out of step with most people on the right on, this is something where I differ a bit, is that I think the election was stolen, but I think it was allowed to be stolen by the Republican Party getting outplayed in every conceivable way. This happened right out in the open, and it was allowed to. So
fair.
And to address Trump, I don't think Trump is above reproach. I just think, pinpointing the rhetoric as being the cause of violence, I take issue with that. But I do take issue with a lot of what Trump has done, especially as someone who's ardently pro-life, as I've already said. But as far as Trump not attending debates, the American people had the chance to reject that and say, you're not going to attend debates, you're not our guy. And we didn't. We nominated Trump overwhelmingly as our nominee. And while I understand that what went on the other side, may be constitutional, for the side that constantly claims they're saving democracy, I just find it, a little bit, it rings false, right? And obviously Kamala covered for Joe Biden. What, did she not know that he wasn't doing well, and that's why he dropped out so late, that they couldn't have an actual primary process where people were not disenfranchised of their vote? They disenfranchised, their own party essentially, and then just appointed a nominee. And while that may be constitutional, I don't think it's representative of democracy or of listening to people, because she's been wildly unpopular for the past 4 years, and now suddenly overnight she's magically popular. But we did have the opportunity in the GOP to say no to Donald Trump, and we didn't. So, he didn't have to attend the debates, really, because we could have rejected that.
I think the issue of that, you'd also see with right-wing populism, right? I think that's, I don't know who brought it up, but I think someone else brought it up before.
Right.
I think that's still not okay, right? For example, I think still to this day, a lot of Trump's policy is not clear in terms of what he wants to get done, right? Obviously, overall, for example, we know his general stance on immigration in terms of foreign policy. We have concepts of an idea, but for something that's affecting, I guess, especially in California, I'm not from here, but especially in California, like housing, he still hasn't said anything. I do agree Kamala's plans don't make any sense, like the $25,000 down payment, but without having any sort of plan, how can you even say, okay, this guy is better than that? I can 100% get behind the fact that Kamala's housing plan doesn't make sense, but if the other side doesn't even have a plan, you can't even evaluate, we're evaluating nothing at that point. I still have an issue with some of that. For example, during those debates where he could have actually potentially gotten out more of his plan, we could have actually known what he was running on and what he was going to change from 2020 to now, right? Or from 2016 to now, right? So that just wasn't there for the average voter that wasn't super pro-Trump. I would say probably like me, that was still more on the conservative side, to actually be like, okay, evaluate, does this even make sense? Does it not make sense? Is he even going to win in November? Is someone else going to win, right? So all of those discussions, all those debates and topics just could not happen in that time frame. And I take real issue with that. I do agree that 100%, as I said before, Kamala's taking over the party is also wrong, but I can't discount this just because that happened. Does it kind of make sense?
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Thank you.
the Pope.
Is that a bishop?
I have a
I
question.
thought it was a bishop too. I'm not sure.
Oh.
How do you guys feel about
It's the
what are you
Pope.
guys' opinion about the war in Israel and Palestine?
Sorry.
What do you guys think about the situation in Israel and Palestine?
I want people to stop dying like Donald Trump does. That's my answer. I would like for people to stop dying.
Yeah.
And to be able to afford groceries again.
I'm of two minds on it. I'm personally more on the pro-Israel side, but I'm sort of passively pro-Israel, that I want us to kind of stay out of it.
I want people to stop dying as well, but I also think it's important to consider, like I mentioned earlier, about how we all have our different worldviews. And like if we consider the foundational worldview that a lot of people in Palestine hold, a lot of them are Muslims. And Muslims, if you're following the Quran and the Hadith, they want global domination. They want to wipe out everyone who doesn't worship Muhammad and their God. And so I think for us to skirt around that topic is what leads to a lot of this miscommunication about what the real issue is. And like this idea that we're going to somehow stop the conflict. They're not going to stop because that's literally their plan. That's their worldview, including us in this room. If we don't follow their God, it's either now or later. And so in my mind, yeah, I want death to stop, but I think I don't think we're looking at it at a deeper level.
Hi. First, I just want to say thank you for coming tonight and having a conversation. This is unusual for me, and especially credit to you for walking into the lion's den. I mean, the reverse does not happen. So thank you.
You're right, it doesn't. You're right.
Yeah. So it's free speech all the way. First Amendment, I love it. I want to be able to say what I want when I want, and have a conversation. I guess my question is simple. I know the Walkaway movement's been through a lot in the last couple of years.
Yep.
Where is it today?
Thank you. So in January of 2021, 2 days after January 6th, Facebook banned our group. So we began as a Facebook group just because of like the functionality of Facebook worked the best for us because they have groups, in the groups people can upload their own videos and posts. So we'd grown to over 511,000 people in our Facebook group, and we literally had tens of thousands of videos and written testimonials. On January 8th, Facebook banned our group with no explanation, no option for recourse or appeal, and we lost all the data, we lost our contacts, we lost everything. About 2 weeks after that, I was raided by the FBI, handcuffed, taken to jail, and my life became about fighting the federal government on bogus criminal charges, also related to January 6th, as well as a civil case and having to deal with the January 6th committee. Because I was arrested, and for anybody who doesn't know, on January 6th, I was standing outside of the Capitol. I didn't enter the building, but I did go to DC on January 6th. I was supposed to be a scheduled speaker, and I stood outside of the Capitol for 8 minutes shooting a video. She has a question too. And I uploaded my video to Twitter, and that was enough for the FBI to raid my home and take me to jail, and for the government to charge me with multiple felonies and a misdemeanor charge. I ultimately took a misdemeanor plea deal, but because I took that misdemeanor plea deal, even though I had no violent charges whatsoever, even with the felonies, I was never accused of any violence, vandalism, theft, or destruction. All of my charges were literally standing on grounds that I was not supposed to be standing on, essentially. Nonetheless, the left doesn't really draw any lines or distinctions. It's just simply, you were a part of the insurrection. And since I was a part of the insurrection, we were permanently banned by PayPal, Venmo, Stripe, Patreon, 6 different email services, payment processors, banks. I was placed on a terrorism watch list, not able to get on an airplane without hours of security screening, flying with air marshals. I mean, the list is on and just unbelievable. So where we are today, we did launch a new Facebook group. It's growing slowly, much more slowly than we did the first time, but we're at about, 35,000 people right now. We launched our own app called Walkaway Social. We did that as sort of like a backup to the Facebook group. So our app it functions very similarly to Facebook, but people can join there, join our community, share their stories. And I gotta say, I don't know how we've survived this, but we have. I mean, we had this year, this is our 6th year, and we had, I think from a financial standpoint, our second best year that we've ever had. So somehow people are still supporting us. We're still traveling the country doing our thing. People are still sharing their walkaway stories. And although it's been a really, really rough road, I mean, I think there are times I just think that I'm not being called upon necessarily to succeed like I was succeeding before January 6th. I think I'm just being called upon to stay in the fight. And that's what I intend to do, is just to stay in the fight as long as I possibly can.
So on that same note, I have to say you're incredibly intelligent. I have a master's degree. I'm new to the Walkaway movement, and I really appreciate everything you brought to the table today.
Thank
you. My wife and I, we're fairly new to the movement. We're two of the members of the Facebook group, but we've encountered a lot of this resistance in our group too. Friends, family, you name it. And we're trying to find an open dialogue, you know, but there's a lot of hate out there. And we're just trying to think the best way to approach these conversations with people, especially in such a trying time right now.
What is the best way to approach these conversations? Okay, look, I always give this like kind of same piece of advice, which is that I base this off of my own experience that caused me to walk away. I'm not going to tell the whole story, but basically I believed something about Trump that wasn't true. I was spouting off about it on social media. Somebody reached out to me privately and said, hey, I'm not trying to start a fight with you. I know you're really upset about this thing that you think about Trump. I'm just asking, have you seen this? And she sent me a video, and the video debunked this thing that I thought about Trump that wasn't true. But what was really powerful and effective about this is that, one, she didn't reach out to me and just be like, you're such a moron, you're so stupid, why do you think this? She literally just said, hey, will you watch this video and will you tell me what you think about it? I had to watch it 4 times before I was able to like emotionally and psychologically process it, because I knew from the first time I watched it, I was like, oh my God, I'm totally wrong. Like I'm totally wrong, but I couldn't accept it because nobody wants to think that they're wrong, right? So it took me a few days, but I finally got back to her and I was like, look, I appreciate you sending this to me. It's going to take me a while to like process this and figure it out, but I appreciate that it meant enough of, to you to contact me about this. And what I learned from that experience was nobody, no matter whether you're on the right or the left or the middle or whatever, nobody likes to be pushed in a corner and have someone wag their finger at you and tell you that you're wrong. And it's an even worse feeling when you know that like you're presented with evidence that shows you that you're wrong, but the person is judging you or making you feel stupid or whatever. And what she did was she allowed me, without judgment, the space to absorb something that, and to take the time that I needed to do that and process it. So one, I always recommend to people, take an approach similar to that. Like if you see friends or family who are like, oh my God, Trump, and you find some sort of like compelling or powerful thing that sort of shows that he's not what they think that they are. I mean, I think if you can send that to somebody and be like, hey, I just watched this video and I think it's so interesting. I know you think that Trump is so this or that, but like, would you watch this and tell me what you think about it? Because I'm really interested to get your perspective on what this video means. The other thing I always tell people is that if you're engaging in a conversation with somebody on the left, try to establish what I call mutual core values, meaning that, because the left thinks that they sort of have this like chokehold on morality and goodness and all these different things. And I think that Republicans don't do a great job of explaining that conservatism is compassionate. And it's like, having a border wall, strong borders, or whatever the issue may be, gun control, or not gun control, Second Amendment rights, these are all actually very compassionate things and that actually help people, lift people up, improve people's lives. And so I think that if you can say like, oh, you care about racial minorities, or oh, you care about immigrants, so do I. Like, I'm very concerned about immigrants and racial minorities. That's why it's so important that we have strong borders. Because these communities are most disproportionately affected when we flood our country with illegal immigrants. They're being financially devastated by it. Crime is surging in their neighborhoods. Like, if you actually care about these different groups you claim to care about, you should embrace conservative policies because they're more compassionate than the things you believe in.
Yeah, it's not from a place of hate. We just want to make sure that we're living a better life. That's what it comes down to. But yeah, well said, and we do put humor in there wherever we can. So
absolutely.
Every little bit counts. Thank you. That's very well said.
Thank you. Regina, there's this girl back here. I'd really like to hear from this girl in the back, please. Yeah.
Because I seem like a radical?
Kind of, yeah. Honestly, yes.
Okay, sorry to disappoint. This isn't actually.
There's a MAGA hat under there.
This isn't actually a question. I was just wondering if I can make a brief defense of the third-party vote.
Say it again.
A brief defense of the third-party vote?
Sure.
Okay, and the mask is just because of the cameras, but...
Okay.
Okay, so you said that your vote was wasted when you did a third party at some point. I would argue that the best way to waste your vote is to vote for the prevailing candidate in a non-swing state. You want to, when you vote third party, you are telling the establishment that you're willing to show up and vote, but that neither group has earned your vote. And every time you vote for a third party, you are building the viability of third parties in general. And that will help us in the long term potentially get out of the stranglehold that is the two-party system. And there is a caveat to that when there's a very close election because some of the states allocate their electoral college votes based on the popular vote. But aside from that, vote third party.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You want to what? Spit it out.
I see the point of that. If there were a viable third party that could win, I might join. But I think for me personally, I feel like it feels like there's so much on the line, and being somebody who had to live under the worst circumstances of a blue state and move to a red state to feel that individual liberty. For me, sometimes when people say there's no difference between the parties, I'm like, yes, there is. Yes, there is. The Republican Party sucks. It is the second worst of the two parties, but I feel like the best way to introduce independence is through the two-party system, which I think we're seeing with Tulsi Gabbard and RFK, and I feel like we're sort of taking over the Republican Party to become an independent party, I think.
So let's do two more questions. We'll hear, because I know you wanted to ask one, and there's a gentleman over here. So we'll do these two, and then it's getting a little late. So
I want to do a couple questions. Is that okay, or should I just try
for
to
God's sake. It's always the guy at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
my name's Kevin. I'm from Wisconsin. I'm a Catholic.
Hey, Kevin.
And so I haven't been involved that much in politics in the past, but I was sort of looking at this race a bit. And I come from a union family. And when the Teamsters president endorsed Trump, I thought that was really interesting because it's like, oh wow, there's a lot of like union involvement in this election. But I was looking around at like history sources and various things, and it seems like because. When my like ancestors came here, when my immigrant family came here, like Catholics were demonized when they came to America, and different like racial minorities have been demonized when they've immigrated to America, or they've been like a minority in America. And it seems like there's a pretty good precedent for immigrants and racial minorities being used as a tool against working class people to try to divide them, when the people who control their wages at the end of the day aren't the immigrants, it's the elite, right? And so when I look at Trump, like I think he has a lot of interesting policies, a lot of good policies for immigrants. Not for immigrants, for workers. But I fear that he is using this sort of same already used like rhetoric that ultimately is compelled by people who are completely out of touch with American people. I just wonder what your thoughts are on that.
Were you here earlier when we were kind of touching on this, or? No?
I'm not sure if I was.
Okay. I mean, economically, an influx of illegal immigration does impact the people who are working the lowest paid jobs. I mean, that does happen.
But you've got to stop. You've got to stop talking about anti-immigrant rhetoric. It's illegal migrants.
Okay.
No, it's really important.
Well, yeah, but the people who are paying them are making like massive stock dividends, and like I don't understand how I should say, oh, this person from another country is trying to like hurt me or trying to hurt my friends, when we're getting paid minimum wage because of some guy who's sitting in like a luxury apartment in New York,
well,
right?
You're assuming, first of all, that, I mean, aren't we then assuming that everything we're talking about is like a big box store with a CEO making millions, as opposed to independent mom and pop shops? I mean, it's kind of
a fair point, yeah.
Utopian idea to think that, oh, you can obviously afford to pay more than $15 an hour, so why aren't you? And I think that when people do come to this country and they're fugitives and they're hiding and they're willing to work for less, for cash, and they're willing to work overtime, and they don't know what their rights are, I think that does have an impact on workers. I think that has an impact on the economy. How could it possibly not? And this has been shown time and again.
I've seen mixed stuff, but I'll move on to the second question. It's for Brandon, right?
Yes.
So you were talking a lot about the January 6th stuff, and about like this fight, and not letting like sort of the government like persecute conservatives, can persecute people who support Trump. But I was looking around online because I was curious, and I looked at some court files, and there's like a quote from the FBI saying that you were like remarkably complicit with their investigations, and there's like a list of people that you gave over to the FBI. I don't understand how like an organization like Walkaway should be associating with you when you are giving up your supposed like.
Who did he give up?
There's a list of them. They're in the court document. I can
Let
pull
me-
it out right now.
let me- sorry.
I can pull it out right now.
Yeah, please.
There was.
But please do it.
Ali Alexander.
Let's do it slowly. Hold on. Let's
okay,
do it
okay,
slowly.
no,
I'm trying to answer your question.
Yeah. Ali Alexander.
Ali Alexander has never been charged with any crimes.
Okay. Amy Creamer.
Never been
Kylie
charged
Creamer,
with any crimes.
Cindy Chaffin.
Never been charged with any crimes.
Simone Gold.
Was charged before I was arrested, weeks before I was arrested.
Okay.
And she's
but
one of my
it's-
closest friends.
It says they were that your like testimony was used in the court proceedings with them.
No, it doesn't say that.
Okay.
Nothing I told the FBI has ever been used in a court
Elijah
proceeding.
Schaefer.
Never, wasn't charged.
Christopher Drew.
Not charged.
Michael Caudry.
Can I just save you time? Nobody that I was asked about has ever been charged with any crimes except for Simone Gold, who was charged before I was arrested.
That's not what this is saying, but I will take your word for it.
What is it saying?
It's a.
I don't deny that I was
court
asked
document.
questions about people. None of those people have ever been charged with a
It
crime.
says, I mean, in its conclusion, it says that
I'm sure
Mr. Mr. Straka has turned a page by providing information concerning criminal activity on January 6th on 3 separate occasions.
Wait, what are you reading?
I'm reading a court document. I'm reading. What's is there a title?
Criminal activity.
It's a motion for permission to seal. It's the conclusion of the motion for permission to seal.
But what I guess I haven't seen that document. That doesn't make sense to me.
But it's from your court case.
No, I understand, but that doesn't make sense to me because no one I was asked about was charged with a crime. So how could I report criminal activity about people who weren't charged with crimes? Do you think that just out of the kindness of the government's heart, they decided not to charge the people that I
I'm presuming
reported?
that the lawyers wrote what happened in this and there are others. I found this in an article which is talking about how you got a.
I'm
reduced
sure you
sentence
did. Daily
because-
Beast or Mother Jones?
I don't remember where I got it from. I
That's
usually
enough.
try to use my sources, you know. But
yeah.
Yeah, but it just I don't know why people should trust you when you.
Well, right, and perfect. That's absolutely perfect because that's the reason why they did this. So first of all, every January 6th defendant who takes a plea deal, one of the requirements of getting a plea deal is that you have to interview with the FBI. So far, about 1,500 plus people have been charged for January 6th. I'd say about 95% of them have taken plea deals, which means every January 6th defendant who took a plea deal did exactly the same thing I did, which was sit down and answer the government's questions. Now, in my case, they had a list of names of people that they were asking me questions about. They weren't really asking about January 6th. They were really asking about my personal relationships with these people. Some of them I don't know. Some of them I'd never heard of. And some of them I do know and I have heard of, and I've had a working relationship with them before. I wasn't able to provide any information on anybody that resulted in any criminal charges because I don't have any information that anybody I know committed a crime. Nonetheless, I was cooperative with the FBI and the DOJ because that was part of the requirement of me having my felonies dropped and getting a plea deal. What happened was that after I served my sentence, I think I was the first J6er who began doing media interviews, telling the truth about what the government's doing, how they're abusing people. And also we started doing walkaway events again and we began to recover. And when those things started happening, the left-wing media created, the first thing that happened was that the DC courts accidentally unsealed my sealed documents and sent them in a bulk email to NBC, Huffington Post, and New York Times, et cetera. Without them ever asking me a single question, they published that list of names and said that I had turned those people into the FBI to get a plea deal. I was asked about those people by the FBI, but you really can't have it both ways because I kind of get what you're trying to do here, and you're trying to present me as this untrustworthy person, and that's the reason why they did it, because they wanted to try to present me to the public as an untrustworthy person. But I don't think you can call someone an informant if no one that they talked about is ever charged with a crime. Otherwise, we're all informants all the time, every day, every time we talk about anything. Okay. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to clear that up.
Can you inform on me for something? Just make it up. Like, I feel so left out.
Well, you commit fashion crimes every day.
How dare you?
Hi, I also want to thank you for being here today, and thank my brother for bringing me here today. As a lesbian woman who grew up in California, I'm pretty disappointed with the movement of trans against children, and I say against because it is. Growing up with 7 siblings, me being one of the youngest, and having some traumatic things happen to me as a child, I, at the age of 6, wanted to be called my brother's name John and be a boy. And today I probably wouldn't have breasts, and I probably wouldn't be able to talk at this pitch, and I probably wouldn't be able to get my period. Today I saw a New York Times article that came out that exposed a study being done about puberty blockers, that they are not reversible, the consequences.
Gee.
So everything that us tinfoil hat people have been saying is now, of course, coming out to light, as it always does. I just wanted to know what your touch on that was, what your thoughts were on that article, and
well,
just
every
your feelings.
every other developed nation has put a pause on puberty blockers. The U.S. somehow is like the last to get to the game. I mean, it's not even tinfoil hat at this point. They're not reversible. Certain puberty blockers have been used to chemically castrate criminals. There's been articles before this trans craze ever happened, this social contagion, about the effects of puberty blockers. And there's this group in West Hollywood, I think it's called the Trevor Project, and they are funded by a pharmaceutical company that makes puberty blockers. So it's all, I mean, it's awful what we're doing. And if you go on puberty blockers, I'm sure a lot of people in this room know this, and then you do decide that you want to go on cross-sex hormones, and you want to go through with the process of transitioning, which is biologically and physically impossible anyways, you are guaranteed to be sterile for life, which is not a decision that a child could. I mean, you don't even know what it means to want to have children when you yourself are a child. I mean, we're treating kids as if they're like Gumby, and we can just kind of press pause on puberty, and you can decide which puberty you want to go through, which is totally crazy. And then, of course, I'm sure most people, Irreversible Damage by Abigail Shrier, who's actually pretty liberal, is a very good book on this. I'm sure most people realize that actually puberty is the cure for feelings of gender dysphoria at least 70% of the time, if not more. You know, so if, we should be letting children go through this, because at the end of the day, your life is going to be better if you don't feel like you're trans, and that has very little to do with social rejection, and more so to do that with the fact that you've rejected your biology, and you're now functioning with parts that don't belong to you, hormones that are not native to your body, and very often you're not able to conceive, not able to do these things, not able to have an orgasm sometimes. So to pin this on, oh, we just need to accept trans people more is really, really absurd, because we're basically doing like a horror film, and now it's going to children, which has to stop.
Well, yeah, like Chuck Schumer said, we're not populating enough. Well, why aren't we? Vaccines, this transgender movement, the puberty blockers.
What?
I was just saying that Chuck Schumer came out and said, we're not populating enough, and that the immigration is going to help with population. And it's just, kind of creating the problem to then give the solution that they've already had for a long time, creating this agenda. But I also want to point out that, me growing up in the 80s, I'm 40 now, growing up in the 80s with the movement and everything like that, I do feel like it's been hijacked. I do feel like I've never felt more unsafe as a lesbian. I've never felt more unsafe as a woman in my whole life. Like, it's not even easy for me to say I'm gay anymore. I feel like maybe here in Berkeley, sure, but in my own family, growing up as a Catholic, they've loved me, they've accepted me, and I know that's not everybody's story, but if this were happening, if that were me today, I might be ripped away from my parents. I wouldn't have any inclusivity with my family that does love me. So I just wanted to bring that light in this conversation. So thank you.
No, we're the two of us are always saying that we're 100% the people who would have been targeted with this when we were growing up if it were happening like it is today. I mean, when I was a teenager, I just wanted to be David Bowie. If this were now, I'd be lucky to get out of middle school with my balls intact. It's true, though.
Well, I mean, it reinforces gender stereotypes, which is what the left claims to be against. It reinforces the idea that there's one way to be female and a woman and one way to be a man and male. And if you don't abide by those things, well, then clearly you were born in the wrong body, which is already an absurd notion, because what's the right body? Right.
Appropriation. With appropriation, you're appropriating womanhood. You're appropriating what a man thinks a woman is, which then just brings in the whole.
You can't know what it's
misogyny
like
thing.
to
It's
feel like
insane.
a
It's
woman if you've never been a woman.
Yeah,
How
so
do you know?
it's literally such a so I also kind of want to bring in like the mind control. It's like modern day mind control where there's so many ideas being thrown around that they contradict each other that we actually have like no idea how to feel secure in how we think. So like me thinking something and saying something out loud may seem brave, but to believe it myself is harder than convincing people in a room.
That's what I think is the danger of the permissiveness of this new like radical trans and this like hair trigger sort of like reaction to believing that kids may or may not be trans. Like, I have a theory on this I'll share with you, I don't know. But I sort of believe that if you're a kid, the way you don't yet have the life experience or the cognitive maturity to understand sexual emotions because you haven't hit puberty yet and you don't know what that is. But I will say that I don't know if you and I have ever talked about this, but like I was somebody who knew I was gay when I was really young.
I didn't.
Yeah. And but like I can remember being in kindergarten, first grade, and having crushes on like men, you know, and boys and stuff. Now, because my little tiny young brain didn't understand sexual emotions yet, I internalized that as thinking that if you like men, it's because you're a woman. And I remember being like a kindergarten and first grade and being like, I wish I was a girl. I wish I was a girl. Because to me, girls get to be with boys. Right. I didn't understand, you know, but then as I got older, I came to realize like, for some of us, you can be a boy and you can be with a boy. We call that gay. That's what that is. Yeah. But I think that's where for some, not all, but for a lot of gay kids, this confusion comes because the closest thing their little brains are able to relate to is being the opposite gender, because by being the opposite gender, these feelings that you might have for people of, you know, even just like a little, you know, 7 or 8 year old crush.
Fear, right? Like,
or that.
Like something that happened to me when I'm younger, maybe I don't want to be attracted by men. I don't want to be attracted to men.
Yeah.
I want to not be anything associated with that. Dealing with my own problems in therapy and not having gender have any conversation in that, I am confident in being a lesbian, that's fine. But as a child, absolutely not.
Right.
Absolutely not. And it was a lot of fear-based, you know?
But I just, you know, these days, I think that's the problem because the culture is so permissive now that if you did happen to have a child who was destined to be gay at some point and they were 7 or 8 years old, and the best way they're able to articulate what they're experiencing is by saying like, I think I'm a girl, or I think I'm a boy, because that's the best way they can understand that. There is this sort of like knee-jerk reaction now to be like, oh my God, I have a trans child.
Absolutely.
You know, let's put him in a dress and let's do, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank
anyway,
you.
we should wrap up. Yeah.
Talk about that all night.
Thank you all so much. Is he gonna say something? Oh, yes.
In 2020, Donald Trump said the election was stolen by Joe Biden. And now that Joe Biden's president, I guess my question is, how does Donald Trump have any chance of winning this year?
Way to bum us all out at the end. I don't know. I've been asking that for like 3 years.
I do think
and
that
now I don't want to think about it.
I do think that the election, I think that the things that led to the inauguration of Joe Biden, I think that some of those things are going to be more difficult to pull off this time around. We were in very unusual circumstances in 2020. It was like, oh my God, because of COVID, anything goes. Like, you know, drop it off in a Dropbox, drop off 100 ballots in a Dropbox. We don't care. We're not totally existing in the same system. I have not a lot of amazing things to say about the Republican Party, but I do believe that some measures have been put into place that they're able to start filing lawsuits immediately if things start looking weird on or shortly after November 5th. We didn't have those things in place last time. I mean, the left loves to say, like, you guys lost every court case. We really didn't. I mean, a significant number of them, the filings came in too late, they missed the deadlines, or there was like a lack of standing issue. So I think that we have some mechanisms in place, and he's polling really well.
And we're voting early, which
Yeah.
I don't think we've now, I mean, because a lot of us as Republicans do want single day voting, we want paper ballots, but right now those aren't the rules, and we have to use the rules to our advantage. I don't know if we did that in 2020 as well as we could have, and the other side is doing it. And so when stuff happens on election day, you have a personal emergency, or the machines break down randomly, who is most impacted? Republicans, because they waited till the day of. And also when you vote early, the campaign can check you off. You know, they don't have to keep sending resources to you that could be used towards a less likely voter. So I think we've gotten the gist to vote early, and right now the numbers are really well for Republicans voting early, turning in ballots early. So I think that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like to hear about it.
I think we have cause for optimism. Those of us who support Donald Trump, I think we have cause for optimism. Thank you all so much for coming. Have a great night.
Who's getting the cocktails?
You are. Thank you guys so much. Thank you.